All right, everyone, we're on another episode of the Claytalkshow. Today, I got a great technical instructor who's going to give us some insight as to the people who are looking to get their first role in IT or cybersecurity. He's going to give us an insight as to how to land those roles, what to do to get those roles, and just give a little background as to why is it important to learn the basic foundational skills when we're trying to make this transition. A lot of people tell you that you can just jump straight into making top dollar salary ranges, the TikTokers and uh, the influencers, but still have to start from the foundations. Foundational knowledge is what's going to eventually get you those salaries that you're looking for. So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce Chris, and you can just give us a little background about yourself, and we'll go into it.
Hi, everyone. First, I want to say thank you, Lee, for having me here. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to be on your podcast and your YouTube channel and talk to you about the different areas of cybersecurity. So, a little bit about myself. I've been in cybersecurity for over 20 years. I've been working throughout my career. I've worked for Fortune 500 companies. I did 17 and a half years at the House of Representatives where I carried through multiple roles. I was started as a senior analyst, became the forensics lead, malware analysis lead, and then at the end I was the cybersecurity engineering lead, which was over the entire House of Representatives. And then I left after 17 and a half years and went back into the private side where I started my own company, which now I provide my own cybersecurity bootcamp based on those 20 years, along with other courses. So basically, I like to educate and help people begin their careers.
All right, that's some good information, and that's a great background. So, with being in the field for 20 years, and now you're helping others come into the field of cyber and IT, let's just talk about some common issues we may see with people making their transition, right? So, everyone, we're all on LinkedIn. I'll leave his LinkedIn in the description. You can follow Chris, and just want to talk about, I guess, just some common questions you may get. How to get into the field is a common one I get. What should I learn? What should I do? Should I
Yep.
go to college? Should I pay for this boot camp? Should I, go to this school? Should I go to that place? So it's a lot of different information coming from everywhere. But what would you recommend people who are just starting out?
Sure, absolutely. All right, so the first thing I'll say is there's no single right answer. So I'll give you, as much help as I can, but I'll be upfront, no one has the perfect answer because if they did, right, you and I probably wouldn't have this conversation and everyone would just kind of go that one route. So, uh, you know, everything I say is just really to help. But okay, there's a few different ways to tackle this. Is the first thing is if you don't have any technical background, one of the first things and the best things that you can do is start to develop the core basics. And I mean, learn what a computer is. Like, really, the A plus is a good, starting point for those. Really, just getting those IT basics. Uh, that is important because everything you do from there starts to just continue to build. Okay, and if you're going on the technical side of cybersecurity, some of the common areas that I tell people you want to learn are first of all those IT fundamentals, right? So everything that you see in the A plus side. When you go from there, start to develop an understanding of operating systems, your Windows, get some Linux behind you. Well, the reason I say that is if you think about any company you go work for, and it doesn't matter, um, if you don't have any experience, you're going to run into most likely, right, Windows or Linux in terms of working at any company out there. So having that first part of understanding can help you get that initial IT role, whether it's help desk, whether you're junior system admin. There are so many different IT jobs out there. We'd probably spend all night naming them out. But really, those entry level jobs, no matter what they are, Here's the thing, as I tell people, don't try to just skip into cybersecurity. Get an IT job first. Okay. I started out on help desk, did the long hours, got yelled at on the phone, the whole 9 yards. But here's the thing is when you start out in IT and you start to learn how companies work, that is where a lot of, companies that are looking for people, they want that experience because they know that you understand the environment. Okay. So really establishing that first level. Now, once you kind of have that foundation, so we started with, A plus, your IT foundations, right? And then we went into operating systems. And again, you want to get the basics of those. And the next thing is get some networking basics. Understand how routers work, understand fundamentally how switches work, and how traffic traverses the internet, right? Because everything today is networked. And I'll be honestly, one thing, I've been a hiring manager for over 10 years, and one of the consistent weaknesses I see in SOC analysts and even some security engineers is that they don't have enough of a networking background. They don't understand how the protocols work, and it's really, really key to build that. So everyone out there, trust me when I say understanding how computers communicate will help you throughout all the different areas of cybersecurity. Take a computer and turn it off the internet. What good is it? It's not. You're not going to be able to do too much with it, right? So that's why everything is networked today. All right. So once you move on to networking, um, you know now let's say you start getting closer to your cybersecurity side. So you want to learn the balance, learn a little bit of the offensive side. Just get the fundamentals of how the attacks happen, okay? And then you want to get your defensive side and understand how to protect. Either one of those, you could go in one or the other and spend an entire career and never learn anything. So you want to start out again with foundational knowledge. You don't have to know everything. And then obviously there's cloud. You want to definitely, understand some cloud, foundations. Some of the popular ones, AWS, Azure, Oracle. You keep the list keeps going. Just get some foundations out. There's a lot of free courses that you can take out there, or you could even, create your own free account. That's how I started learning them. I just signed up, did a free account, started building EC2 instances on AWS and S3 buckets, and started just playing around with the networking and really understanding and taking my experience to what they're doing in the cloud, and that helped. So really the key, and you'll probably hear me say it throughout this podcast, is before you try to dive in too deep, get some really solid foundations.
All right, yeah. So those foundations are key, right? In any role you go to, you'll see some. There's always going to be some foundational problems that may happen. Just like uh, somebody may call in, no matter what role you're in,
You know,
they say, "Hey, my application is not loading." Some so small still happens at higher level roles, and if you don't have foundation knowledge, you'll be at a higher level role wondering why the application's not loading. Oh,
yep,
you're not even connected to an access point. You don't even have Wi-Fi on your computer. Of
yep,
course, it's not going to work, right? So simple, basic things like that can help out in the long run, especially with the networking part. So me myself, I'm not a network engineer or nothing like that, but I'm always reading about more networking skills to better myself because networking does help, and having that knowledge will bring you more confidence, say,
absolutely.
when you are interviewing or when you're doing your job. Definitely will bring you more confidence as to what you're looking at and analyzing. But you touched on a good point of the starting point, right, with the help desk. Now, help desk, there's been a lot of professionals I've seen and talked to, and it's 50-50 with the is it necessary to start at the help desk? Is help desk even worth people going to? Because these days it can be seen as a black hole, as a you get stuck there type of role if you're not.
Hmm.
I just, in my opinion, I'd just say it's up to that person who's in that role to make the best out of it and learn outside of the job.
Hmm.
And that's how you prevent yourself from getting stuck. But they do have some good points when they say help desk isn't the only entryway into
Hmm.
uh, the technical uh, career, whether it be support, networking, or cybersecurity. So, but what the issue is, if you're not going to start at the help desk, wherever
Hmm.
role that you choosing that you want to start at, you still have to have that knowledge in that role. So if you don't want to be at the help desk example, but you want to be a network admin,
Right.
that's what you need to know. You have to know networking protocols. You have to know network troubleshooting, VPN setup, wireless access point
Yep.
setup. You know how they communicate with each other, and it'd be great if you get that experience more in a like enterprise environment. How they work in an enterprise environment versus a smaller company setup. So
Yep.
what would you recommend for people who don't want to start at the help desk? So, say a lot of people who's making a transition already have an established career in whatever field they may be in, HR, customer service,
Sure.
and already making 50, 60 plus thousand wherever the location they're at. But
Right.
help desk has a reputation of $30,000 to $40,000, and they don't want to necessarily take a pay cut
Absolutely.
to get to that transition. So, what would you recommend for that?
No, that's an awesome question. Okay, so let's talk a strategy here. So the first thing I would say is, you want to develop again. Let's say if you want to go from HR into cybersecurity, so you want to get a foundation of cybersecurity. You don't have to be an expert, but you definitely want to know what position you want to go into. So one of the first things I would say is, if you're a current professional, identify the position or positions that interest you. And what you want to do is, I'll give you a kind of an insider trick here, is look at about 10 to 12 different position listings for whatever it is you're interested in. And what you want to do is take the requirements from each one of those, copy them down, okay, and then start to highlight the common requirements that you see amongst them. And what you'll do is you'll find that, let's say, you get 12 jobs, and let's say each one of them has 10 requirements. So we start out with 120, right? But if you look at what's common amongst all of them, you'll probably come out to about, honestly, maybe 10 to 20. So it narrows down, like, this is what everyone's looking for. What certs do they want? What are the common requirements? Like, must know networking, must know TCP IP, must know VPNs. Look for what they all have in common. And here's another thing that I want everyone to realize is, I don't care what position you work. I used to stalk overnight when I was in school for Sam's Club, right? I 3 in the morning, they would drop off pallets and I just put stuff in a shelf. And did you know that one of my first jobs, they actually hired me because I took that job and I was able to relate something to that company, what they needed. And what happened in that interview is, they said, this is for a help desk job. Okay, they said, what do you do now? I said, oh, I'm going to school for IT and I work at Sam's Club stocking the shelves. No prior IT job, period. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, in my resume, I said, oh, I improved the amount of time that it took me to stock, and I was able to output 2 times more than anyone else because I devised my own system. And the manager, he perked up and was like, oh, that's interesting. What did you do? All right, that's what the point I want to get to is, you have to understand that whatever you're doing today relates to cybersecurity in some way. Okay, you lock your doors at night, right? You don't leave your wallet out where it's exposed. When you check into work, you might lock things up. Everything that you're doing that secures anything. I want people to start thinking outside the box. It relates to cybersecurity.
Yeah,
So, how
exactly.
do you go from that non-technical into a technical role is show them that you know how to think in a process way into how to improve something. And what happens is those managers, they'll see that you have that potential to learn and grow. And when you're starting out entry level, no one's going to expect you, or they should not expect you to already know like what you're doing. What they're looking for is your potential. So make sure that you show them that potential. And you know what? Without being like cocky, show confidence that you are not afraid and you're willing to work and learn what you have to. So use your newness and your motivation as your ally and make that work in your favor. Because I can tell you right now, again, I've been a hiring manager. I get people that sit in front of me that have some experience, and I can tell that they're not motivated to do the job. They're there for a salary, and they're there for a position.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that new person who is like, if I have to work extra or I have to go learn something, I will, and shows me that they have that passion. I can't tell you how many times I've hired the person who doesn't have experience. True story, and I've turned them into a rock star. And literally, like they've gone from, 60,000, 50,000 entry level to making, 150 plus in, just several years, like 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
So, it can be done, everyone. Trust me on that.
Yes, it definitely can. And you touched on the good point of being able to relate what you're currently doing into something that's relevant. Like being a veteran, I talked to another fellow veteran who wants to make the transition into cyber, but say, I have no experience. I'm studying for these certs. And I'm like, you got experience. You're in the military. You have to take um, the mandatory CBTs, which is the computer
Yep.
based training on cyber awareness and keeping information systems secure, right? You know how to respond to phishing emails. You know how to keep your um, machines secure from any outsiders, right? Making sure you take your cat card out. Basic physical controls that are part of compliance. You got to be able to start thinking outside the box. Those are compliance controls that are implemented in the NIST framework. So just studying that framework and being able to relate it to your current job, you can use that as experience. And then he started to think back. Yeah, I remember that. He had a few soldiers under him. He
Mhm.
had to make sure that they completed those yearly trainings and reported it to the manager. That
Yep.
is experience. You have experience already. So don't go in thinking that you have
Yeah.
nothing to offer, but that's compliance experience already. You're making sure that you're staying compliant with the NIST framework, with the physical controls and the administrative controls of um, your your squadron, making sure that they're finishing those annual cyber awareness trainings, which covers phishing emails, which covers how to respond to insider threats and so on and so forth. So just you got to, when I talk to people, just have to be able to dig deep in your role. I don't care what it is. It has something to do with some type of security, some
Yep.
form of fashion. If it doesn't, then that company is probably not where you need to be at anyway. So
Yep.
um, just got to be able to relate that and put it on paper and being able to know how to explain it. That's a big takeaway. Being able to know how to explain the things that you did that translate into cyber.
Well, you know what, Lee? You hit on a few points. So I'll talk to you like if I was a manager, a hiring manager, and just listening to what you said about your friend from the military aspect. And for anyone who's in the military, don't forget these things because I'm telling you, these are big things. You have leadership skills, you have structure, you have organization, you take responsibility, right? I mean, the list goes on. And cybersecurity is a way of thinking. It's not as so it's technical, but at the end of the day, when you really, really kind of come back to the core basics, right? The CIA triad, right? Confidentiality, integrity, availability. Those three are what cybersecurity is built on, and to a degree, information security. The thing is if someone doesn't take that seriously, I don't care how well you know how to configure something or how well you know a certain software. If you don't take cybersecurity seriously and have that mindset, oh, and by the way, did I throw out attention to detail? Right? Military, you have to have that attention to detail. Those are all core tenets that you should really leverage and work, make them work in your favor. Because again, at the end of the day, cybersecurity, if there's someone who's good at something but they don't really show that they care, and they don't show that they're taking the steps to really protect an organization, they're not really benefiting an organization as much as they could. And that's where, in an interview, when they're considering multiple candidates, I can tell you, if they're doing their due diligence for a company, they're going to hire the person that cares the most and that is, willing to learn and shows that, they're going to take that initiative. So, those soft skills work far more than people realize. I can tell you that right now. Because let me just tell you, I don't care if you have a degree, I don't care how many certs you have. If you walk in an interview and I don't feel that you really care about the position, I'll hire that person that shows me that they care and doesn't have any of that. So, you know, I'm just kind of being honest right there as a hiring manager.
Yeah, I wish we can have more of that standpoint. So a lot of people see the issue of being that entry level roles are the hardest to get. So what's the stigma going around is cybersecurity is a big industry, it's booming, it's a big shortage of professionals. But
Yeah.
when people try to make this transition,
Hmm.
they get so many roadblocks. I've
Yep.
already covered a lot of them on my last video with the 25-year end recruiter. That's one big roadblock is just the hiring practices themselves. So
Yes.
that just goes to show people that you can have every single box checked off, but it may not still be your fault due to outdated hiring practices. So you
Yeah.
can check that out in my last video. But anyway, so the big problem is entry level. Some mid-level people are seeing it a little bit, but it's mostly my entry-level people I see on my LinkedIn that is
Yep.
having the hardest time making that transition is because they have 25 different requirements,
Yes.
and it says entry level, but they want you to have CISM or CISSP, which makes no sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how do you feel about these entry level roles that are being
Yep.
posted with management requirements?
Yeah. Oh, all right. Well, again, speaking from a hiring, again, I've hired, many contractors. I've hired actual federal employees in the private sector. I've hired private sector. So, uh, the companies I worked for, again, Fortune 500, right, top tier companies, and I've worked at the smaller companies as well. So here's the one thing is when you see an entry level and they're asking for a CISSP and CISM and these advanced certs, first of all, don't waste your time. And the reason I say that is with all respect, it's because whoever wrote that either doesn't know what they're doing or they want to pay you an entry level, and what they're really looking for is a mid to senior level. Unfortunately, that is what the market has turned into. It's not against you, everyone listen to me. It's when you're trying to get in, if you have those foundational skills like everything I told you, right, you do your due diligence there, all right, and you go to a job that is entry level and they are requiring these high, all these certs and all this experience. Entry level means you don't have experience, first of all. So again, when you start to see those, don't waste your time on it unless you know someone there that can vouch for you. That's my kind of, if you're going to go for that position, don't go for it unless you have a reference or someone that you know. Otherwise, you're probably wasting your time because whoever wrote it, again, they're looking for that mid tier person that the unfortunate truth is that they're looking for someone who needs a job that is higher tier to get in that role that they can pay at an entry level salary. because a real program is looking for potential. That means you don't need to have that experience. You need to have somewhat of that foundational knowledge, right? Because you're gonna have to know, some basics. Let's be, at least get to that
Yeah.
point.
Exactly.
But they're looking for someone they can build up. Okay, so anytime I've hired for entry level, I didn't care how many years of experience you had. I just cared that you knew the basics, and I looked at your attitude and your willingness to learn. And if you showed that motivation, then I would bring you in. Okay. So, one thing to also look for is these larger companies, and this is a big one, these larger companies, they can hold their standards higher because they're big companies and they get thousands of applicants. So, one trick that you can do to get around those, look locally. Look for the smaller companies around you that they are hurting for people because everyone's busy applying for Microsoft, Facebook, all, Netflix, you name it, right? The FANG as they call them. But
Yeah.
they're skipping over all these local companies that, guess what? You can go in there. Maybe the pay's not as high as those other ones, but you can start to gain your experience. So really, be honest with yourself and say, look, I need to gain some level of experience in that job. I need to learn and understand the environment. And what happens is from there, you start to then step up. But if you try to go from zero into like Facebook, the reason they're going to try to pass on you is because they have 10,000 other applicants and they can be picky. So look for some of these companies that are around you, or even some of these companies that aren't as popular, because you'd be surprised. They might be willing to give you a chance, but again, an entry level position should not require 5 years. It should not require a CISSP because you have to have 5 years of experience to be a CISSP. So therefore, that's not entry level. Okay, so you see what I'm saying here. People, don't waste your time.
Yeah.
I'm just going to
Exactly.
be honest with you.
Exactly. But this is how it goes. Well, Chris, I saw on the job postings that for SOC analyst level one, I need the CISSP, or I need or what's another one they say, or
Uh,
CS, or
yeah.
all these other certs. But this is where we get down to the search
Yes.
chasing issue. So you have people who listen to TikTokers who say, "Hey, go get this cert, you guarantee 6 figures," or
Yeah.
"Go to this class, and you're gonna get a job
Right.
automatically."
Yeah.
But that's the problem. So people go stack on 5, 10 certs in a few months.
Yeah.
That's the thing. In a few months, they got them 5 or 10 certs, but
Yeah.
they still not able to find a job.
Yep.
And one reason being that the certs, a lot of them are not practical skills. Like, they tell you about the tools and have
Right.
theoretical methodologies you can follow,
Yep.
but it's not putting you in the real world environment.
Yep.
It's not giving you the problem solving skills that a hiring manager or company they need, especially if you're coming in a role that they need impact for, right? So
Yep.
um, but then I get people say, "Well, you talking against search?" I'm not talking against search. I'm saying don't let the search be the determining factor of you thinking that you're going to land a job. Certs are good to have for the HR screening purposes, but
Yeah. Exactly. Yes.
hands-on skills will always trump education and certs. But
Abs.
if you have both, that's how you stand out,
Yep.
right? So how do I get hands-on skills? What do I do to get those skills if nobody wants to give me a chance? So what would you recommend?
So let me ask you this: if you're taking your car to a mechanic, okay, and let's say you knew a little bit about cars, and you see that the person has, all the certs and everything, and then you're talking to them, and you very quickly realize they don't have the first clue of what they're doing. They don't know how to repair an engine. They can barely change a tire, but they have all the ASC and all the certifications. Would you want them fixing your car?
Well,
No.
not me.
No,
So
but let's say like your uncle or your brother or something that has been working on cars for years. you're probably going to take your car, even though they don't have that, all the certifications. They know how to do the job. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you said it perfectly. First of all, if you don't have experience and you have about 15 certs behind your name, the only thing that is showing is, first of all, good for you for putting into work, but from an actual like professional, standpoint, it doesn't show that you actually know what you're doing in a job because there's no way you remember everything from all those certs. If you
Yeah.
do, then I'm shaking your head right now because
Yeah.
I have a lot of certs myself, throughout 20 years, and I can't remember every single thing. When you're starting out, you don't need that many certs. Maybe a few, maybe one, two, maybe three at most. I wouldn't go beyond that because you don't have any experience to back up those certs. So you
Mm-hmm.
don't need to get 10, 15 certs. And by the way, that gets really expensive.
Expensive.
You
Yeah.
don't need to spend all that money and then, you get to a job and they say, well, that's great, but how much experience do you have? And you're like, So, Lee, you hit on two good points. Number one, you don't need to have a lot of certs. Number two, get hands-on projects. So, Lee, is it okay if I kind of talk to you about my boot camp really quick and why I did a certain
Yeah.
thing in
Yeah.
it? All right. So, for those of you who may not know, I have my own boot camp, right? And I'm sure you've heard about so many cybersecurity boot camps. The thing is, through 20 years of being a hiring manager, I was tired of seeing people miss out on jobs just because they didn't have those right skills. So I created my boot camp to build those skills. So hands-on is critical. So one of the things I do in my boot camp, for example, is I have you build everything in your environment before you apply what you're learning, because that's what you're going to see in real life. You have to understand the environment, how everything works underneath before you apply a particular action. Okay. So make sure that, whether you come into my boot camp or you're in some other, or if you're studying on your own, you've got to get hands on. Make labs, make projects, but then write about them. Write about them on LinkedIn. Create your own blog and write about them. That does two things, is, well, does more than two things, but number one, it shows employers that you're doing hands-on labs, right? If you don't know what to do, look at job requirements and then make a lab. Building servers, you need to know how to do that. So make some labs building servers so you can speak to them. Again, job postings are like your shortcut and your clues into what people need. Okay, so if you're going to spend your time and money, make sure that you're doing things that align with what the position needs. Okay, and then again, as far as certs, you don't need to have more than just a few certifications. Okay, because you really want to get that experience behind yourself as you add certs.
And then just going to talk about this. If you can see this resume here I pulled up, can you see it? Or is it small on your end?
Yeah, let me see here. Can you make it a little bit larger?
Yeah, I'm going to zoom in a little bit.
There you go. That's good. Yep. All right.
So we have this will be an example resume.
Okay.
Um, Someone who obviously has some customer service experience and cashier, but they're trying to make the transition into IT, right?
Sure.
And the only thing they have on here is come tier A+. And then they said, well, I'm applying for jobs and I'm not I'm not getting any I'm not getting any hits. I'm not getting any interviews, no calls.
Yep.
And we're just gonna go from the top. I okay, customer service associate, and you have cash handling, serving the food. How about
Yep.
customer?
Okay. Yep. All right. Here,
All
just
these things here, but it has nothing technical, nothing about learning
and it's
internet
fine.
routing protocols or play with Windows servers. A lot of people think just you slap a cert on a resume, then you should be good to go.
Yep.
You have to edit these things here, right? What would you suggest for something like this?
Yeah. So just looking at the, again from a hiring manager. So you see that every position. Sorry, I'm pointing at the screen here. Every position just lists what they did. They're not showing the outcome or benefits that they brought to that position. So I do like the first one, provided exceptional, customer service. That's good. Responsible for. Well, that's fine, but show an outcome, like improved overall, customer happiness by, and then fill in something that you did that improved it. You got to really show not just what you did, but your outcomes. What were the results of what you did? Okay. And that really goes for all of these is you have to show percentages, improved customer satisfaction by 100%, improve capacity from 200 to 500. Put some metrics behind it, show some outcomes, okay? But overall, that's fine. And also, and sorry if I'm talking too much here, but try to relate what you did to the position, even if it's not directly technical. Forget the technical part and say, in everyday life, how is what I'm doing related to that position? Okay. And then the last thing at the very bottom where it said CompTIA A plus, instead of putting studying, put the target date, saying,
Mm,
targeted date for this time frame, because that is an employer. It tells me like, okay, this person has organization and they have a deadline for when they want to get the cert. That will help you big time.
yeah, and another thing is when, like we just covered with the projects, if you're studying A plus, you should be doing labs because you have to get labs to pass the test in
Yep.
the first place. So you should have you should make some space on your resume showing that you have some competency in basic network troubleshooting. You know about IPv version 4 and 6. You know about DHCP and how does it automatically issue our IP addresses. You know how to configure
Yep.
Windows servers. Um, those, if you're targeting that help desk position, those customer service skills on the resume should be just fine. And
Yep.
like you said, add some output, some value added. That's the biggest thing I think I learned while I was in the military from someone. Shout out to Laos. He may watch this one day, but that one sentence, what's the value added? I remember him saying that in a meeting because we used to do a lot of redundant processes.
Yep.
They wanted to do something so redundant. What's the value added? So always ask yourself this when you writing out your resume and your bullet points. What is the value added of me serving these customers? In turn, the company business customer satisfaction rate went up however many percent that your manager told you in your performance reports, whatever. You just put those metrics down so you can see that
Yep.
you made that impact being in that role. Whether you think it's a small role or big role,
Yep.
every role has an impact on the company. If it didn't, it wouldn't be there. So it has an impact. Remember that, and then the relevant skill set, even if it's just home labs, it still counts as your
Absolutely.
experience. Is
Yep.
your experience. You've troubleshooted when you setting up these home labs. They're not going to be just point and click. You're going to have to set some things up. You're going to have to get some configuration settings right. You're going to have to do some basic security concepts if you're trying to learn more about the security side, had to do those configuration with the firewall rules set up and allow lists and things of that nature, even if
Yep.
it's on a cloud server, you know. So people may ask, how do I set up a home lab or where do I go? But like we said earlier, you can do, or I can't afford a computer, or I can't afford some hardware. And all you need is a basic Windows PC, and you can just get on different cloud providers like AWS. You can spin up EC2 instance for free. Just watch how they monitor or watch how they bill the hours for that specific image that you pick, right? But you can do a lot of these things for free and just play around with it. Watch some more videos on YouTube, and if you're studying for these certs, they're they're giving you the theoretical knowledge that you already need to know. So now it's time to just put it in real life situation at the home, and now slap it on a resume on top of your studying for A plus certification with the target date and the value added in your current role, and you can take that to the interview and may have a significantly better outcome. So that's my advice for the the technical support side of things, at least, to get into that type of role.
Yeah, don't sell yourself short. I mean, honestly, everyone out there has tremendous ability, potential. Show it on your resume. You know, your resume is where you want to brag. And in the interview, show that confidence, show your personality. You know, again, you want to be confident without being cocky, right? So you want to find that balance, but you don't go into an interview like, yeah, I think I know. Show that confidence. Really, and doing those home labs and relating them will give you more confidence because they'll say, I mean, think about the person who read about installing a Windows server, for example, versus someone who's built 10 of them in their home lab.
Hmm.
They're asking questions like, oh, yeah, yeah, I've built 10, 15, Windows servers. Right away, the manager's going to say, okay, yeah, they have some confidence, they know what they're doing, versus, well, yeah, I've read about it, I think I could do it.
Yeah, I
You
think,
know,
yeah, exactly.
you can make these things work for you, but yeah, definitely what Lee said. I can't. Again, it's what I include in my boot camp is those hands-on projects because it's great to read about it, but honestly, you have to apply
Just
yourself
do
and
it.
actually do
Just get in there and do it. It's not going to hurt you just to throw yourself in the mix and just do it. But that goes into the barrier to entry still is great. So I don't want people to get especially right now with thousands of layoffs going around almost every other day. It's crazy. So the barrier to entry, especially entry level roles, quote unquote entry level roles, you will see a significantly more amount of applications for entry level than mid level. Not to say that it's easier, but it's less applicants in mid level. So for people who already you're not you got some college, you went to college but didn't finish, or you got a career that you're just tired of and want something new. It depends on your learning style. If you can learn, the quicker you learn, the faster you can elevate yourself, right? How many hours you can put in into learning hands-on knowledge, and everything isn't super technical, right? Compliance side of things isn't super technical, but still, when you have foundation knowledge, it makes the compliance things, uh, it makes you understand why they're being implemented. When you have some foundational knowledge of security concepts, it makes you understand why you need these certain controls in place with, user authentication, IAM policies, etc. So just learning these things, and you can play around with that still, and then apply that to your experience, and maybe you can apply for mid-level, mid-tier roles instead of the entry level, which is a little bit harder to get into. So when the mid-level, if you want to go there, you just got to know that you have to have the knowledge and the hands-on skill set in order to move into that mid-level role instead. But yeah, that barrier to entry, man, especially entry level, is crazy right now. How do you feel about? How do you feel as though anytime soon that would change?
it. Man, yeah, that's a tough one, right? Because the world is crazy. I mean, between all the politics and just everything that's going around the world. It changes each day. But here's the thing: again, having been in this field for 20 years, I remember the internet bubble back in 1999, and it was very similar, to where it is now, right? Where companies were laying off by the thousands. Some of the companies I worked for went out of business, and I was forced to, go find another job. In one case, I took a 50% pay cut because the economy was so bad when that all happened. So, but here's the thing: is the economy goes up and down, up and down. So right now, and so I tell people, skill up, start learning things. Don't be afraid to learn more because when the jobs come back, guess what? They're going to need even more people, and it will. I mean, you've seen the economy go up and down. There will right now it is what's called a hiring hiring market, right? So they have the choice
Yeah,
versus once the economy goes up, it becomes an employer's market where they get the choice. So it's not going to be in their favor for long. So now, learn now so that when those jobs become available, you can jump into them faster and start gaining that experience that, the more you get, the more opportunities, you have. But again, I'll stress, don't forget to look for those local jobs. Get any experience that's professional will help you on that resume. And then when you add on your side projects and everything you're learning, it just multiplies it from there. It's the same thing that I did in help desk. Just perfect example. I could have been stuck at help desk, but I went and I got my Microsoft certs. I did my Cisco certs. All my friends were out, going out partying. This is when I was
Yeah,
like in my early 20s. I was the guy studying all night, and once I got those certs, and I had that experience, my salary just, you know, was, a lot higher and easier to get. So put the work in, it will pay off. Stay focused. That's another thing I want to tell people. There's so much out there. Focus on those foundations. You don't need to know everything. Learn something, learn it really, really well, and then move on to the next thing. Ask yourself this. This is the part I'll tell you and I'll shut up. In an interview, someone might ask you, what are you really good at? What is your strongest technical area? You should have an answer. If you don't, then that means you're spreading yourself too thin. And, make sure you have that one area that you can come back to that is your strong suit.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, that definitely was geared towards me because I was trying to learn a lot at one time, and it can get overwhelming if you just try to. I need to know this. I need to know this. I need to know this. You want to learn multiple different trades, but you also don't want to do too much at one time. You want to focus in on something one piece at a time. But it's easier said to done when you feel as though you're behind, right? If you say I'm late to transition into the field, whatever age I am, and I'm behind everybody else who's younger than me. But things come with just time and being in the role, but also that goes for me to say the complacency, right? So especially in the times like it is now with layoffs and people who have probably been in their roles for 5, 10, however many years, been doing the same thing. First of all, I would say, that's already a strike against you. You want to always try to learn something new and feel like technology and cyber. Before you make the transition, you just got to ask yourself, are you really ready to be a lifetime learner? Right? You have
Yes,
to
absolutely.
learn something new. If it ain't every few months, at least something new every year. Some new technology, some new
Every
software, some new attack, some new vulnerability that's out.
Yep.
And
Oh yeah.
united, then you're just going to be left behind, and that much easier to let go from the company when the layoffs come around.
Yep.
People who
So
are already in the roles, I just say, keep learning, keep skilling up, because if you stay prepared, you don't have to get prepared.
yep.
So yeah,
Well,
go ahead.
one thing I'll say to that, Lee, is first of all, I could not agree more. Like even when I was at the house, 17 and a half years, I was always, looking for what was emerging, and I would start studying that. Even though I wasn't planning to leave, and even though my role didn't necessarily require it, I always kept my skill set up to the relevant areas, especially if something was new. Like, I remember when virtualization was the big thing, right? And then all of a sudden the cloud came up. I started learning those, and I was one of the first, in my whole division to learn these things. And I didn't have to, right? Because I was, in my role and wasn't really planning on going anywhere. But you always want to keep yourself relevant. But again, pick one. You don't need to pick 10 of them. I've been in this for 20 years, and trust me, I every day recognize that there's so much more to learn. Uh, you know, when people call me a cybersecurity expert, I rather say that I'm senior in it because there's so many things. How do you honestly call yourself an expert in any one? So I just say, look, I've just been in it. I have experience, and I've done quite a bit. But it's a constant learning, and yeah, anyone in their current role, you should always be growing. If you're not growing, you're falling behind. So always continue to learn.
Oh yeah, definitely. So, and that goes to me saying, people say, well, my role is limited, or I only have so much scope of responsibility, but that usually comes from the type of company you're in. So as we said earlier, the bigger companies, you usually have a small limited scope. And then this is why I recommend people who are just starting out. Also, if you have the tenacity to really learn to be thrown into the water, look at the smaller companies, look at the startups, because I was a part of a startup environment that was no SOPs in written already, and I just had to bring what I already knew or learned, and I learned a lot on the job. Also, I learned a lot about configuring IAM policies in AWS. I learned how to set up the zero trust model in the company. I learned how to set up the VPN server. I learned how to do all of these technical things that I really didn't do prior, because when you're in an established environment, all of those things are already done, right? You're just managing it. You're just managing the solutions they have. You know, they may have an update here and there. You may learn a little bit about the update. You can add 10 members at one time instead of just five, or something small like that. But those startup environments, you're going to get a lot more hands-on experience, and you can probably catch up to someone who's been in it for 5 years at Google, and you only been in it for a year at the startup company, because you're implementing things and you're writing the SOPs, you're knowing the ins and outs of the software, you know the ins and outs of the company's security posture, you know all of this, because from the ground up, you're doing it. You're like the architect, you're like the engineer that's implementing everything. So that's always an avenue I try to get people to look at. You know, just because the company's big, that will be good, but it just no, it's just is that much harder to get into, and you may have a uh, learning curve there with the scope of responsibility. So
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, if you focus and you make a plan, you can make those home, so you can call them home labs or home projects. You can make those work in your favor. I've hired people who had zero experience, but they did home labs and were able to speak to the position, not only impressively enough to fulfill the position, but they were already speaking to mid and even senior levels because they stayed focused on those projects, and I could tell that they actually knew what they were doing. So again, like what Lee said, is consider those smaller companies. You know, the larger the company, for the most part, they tighten in what your responsibilities are. They're more focused, right? The smaller company, you might be their system admin, which means you run the network, you run all their servers, you run the firewall. That is an amazing amount of experience that you get to tie in many different systems that you may never get. I guarantee you, if you go to a very large company, you're probably not running their network and their firewalls and their desktops,
they have
infrastructure.
different people doing
Yeah,
things.
they're going
Yeah,
to say, all right, you're going to do this thing and do it
that's
really well.
yeah,
That's
that's
what we
what
want
you
you to do.
focus on. Yep,
Yep.
exactly. So that's
Which,
why I
nothing
definitely,
wrong,
yeah,
but again, if you're new, you want to experience more. So, yeah, definitely.
yeah. So let's go into the skills that you offer in your boot camp. Let's talk about some industry relevant things that people will learn when they pick up your courses.
Sure, absolutely. So, uh, kind of like the outline I give everyone earlier is you need to understand and have the core set of skills to start in IT and then especially move into cybersecurity. So, I begin with the operating systems. I have you build and install Windows Server, configure Active Directory, build GPOs, secure the server. The list goes on and on, right? You do this all from scratch. Like you are installing it, you're doing everything. And then you do the same thing with Linux, okay? Those are the two main operating systems that I do. I move then into networking. So I have you configure switches. I have you create ACLs, access control lists. You're actually controlling the path with VLANs and really understanding how these things work. And of course, I teach you how everything comes together from, all the way from the physical level all the way to the application. I really give you that overview of how all the different technologies work to enable communications. Um, and again, you learn how to also protect, how to detect things on a network to give you that understanding of all the protocols. So that's the networking part. And then I go into offensive. So I'll teach you some of the common tools like Nmap, TCP dump, burp suite, Metasploit, how to find vulnerabilities and how to exploit them. And that's important because it makes you realize when a company isn't patching, I teach you how to find those and how you can exploit them and then how you can actually update and protect them. So I teach the common offensive techniques that you need to know. And then, of course, I move into the defensive side where I teach you how to detect them, how to protect servers, how permissions work, why groups are important. So, all like, again, these core skills that you're going to need not only just in cybersecurity but IT and in general. Okay, so now you have the offensive, you have the defensive, so that really teaches you, the balance between the two. And of course, one other thing from the defensive is I teach you how to actually read packets using Wireshark and detect attacks. And the reason I start with Wireshark is if you can do that in Wireshark, you're going to have a no problem working with a SIM, Security Events Information Manager. That is going to become easy, but you need to understand what's happening under the hood, so to speak, with the packets. So we jump into Wireshark and we actually use real world malware packet analysis to detect things. Okay. And then, I do incident response, a little bit of malware detection. And then I go into the cloud where you'll build an EC2 instance, you'll secure it, and you'll access it from home, so that you understand the infrastructure part and the security that needs to go behind that. And the last thing I drop into is Docker containerization. That's
Mm,
big
yeah.
technology, Kubernetes, Docker, all these containers. You want to learn how to work with those. So I touch a little bit on that and get you some hands on. But throughout the entire thing, there's a lot of detail in there that I'm teaching you how TCP packets actually work. How does DNS work? How does email work? How do you read the headers? All these small things that a lot of unfortunately schools tend to skip over. You actually get hands on and you do all these things. So um, yeah, I can probably send you my brochure, Lee, and if you want to post a link to that or something. There's a lot more. We'd be here for a while, but it's all these core skills that will allow you not only to do the job, but here's the most important thing, and Lee, agree with me or disagree. What has helped me become successful and all the other engineers that I've worked with is having the ability to be adaptable.
Yeah,
Single
exactly.
place. You haven't seen this, but you have this core set of skills that you can apply and you can do the job. That to me is what is like the gold ticket. If you can do that, you're set. And that's what
Exactly.
my boot camp. That's really the whole purpose of my boot camp, to give you that skill.
Those skills are the biggest thing, right? That what you said in the school environment, you're not. A lot of times you're just skimming over these things. Yeah, they'll tell you what Wireshark is a network monitoring tool, sniffer. Okay, then they go to the next thing, but you haven't really touched it. You haven't gotten into it. You haven't seen how connections come in with the different flags they have, and can inspect to see the different encryption protocols they're using, and et cetera, et cetera. So learning these tools that are needed in the industry because people don't really get into using them until they get into these roles. So if you're already having this pre-exposure, it makes it just a little bit easier to stand out, knowing when they ask you these questions. Or I know I had an interview for a SOC analyst before. They show you a logs of things that's happening in Wireshark, and or in the sim. They show you the log was in the sim and actually what's happening. But if you never really explored inside of the sim before, you're not you're just going to be lost, because when people see these scripts being run and people share screenshots of these scripts, a lot of people on the outside of the technology field say, "Oh, that looks like it's too much. It's coding going on. It's something I don't understand. It's another language, but it's still English. It's just the way the computers talk to each other. So if you learn, just a little bit of reading and understanding those logs and actually hands-on remediating things that comes into the sim, then there you go. You fulfilling what they need in the company. Makes it easier to get a job, but instead of saying I don't know, right? So
Yep. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
it's telling a story. I mean, when it comes to the SOC, people ask me like, "What's the secret to being a great SOC analyst?" And the secret is there is no secret. It's about telling the story of what you see in terms of the traffic, and developing a context and developing like an understanding of what you see, so that you determine, is this okay or is there something bad going on? The only way you know that is by developing that story through an understanding of what the traffic is telling you. And it's different every time. I wish I could say, oh, just follow these three rules and you'll detect a bad, a bad actor, right? That's not how it works. Is you
yeah,
have to understand your environment by understanding what you see in the protocols and in telling the story. That's why I tell people, before we get to a sim or an IDS, IPS, any of that fun stuff, right? You have to understand what it looks like from the packet level and all the different protocols,
yeah,
TCP, the IP, all the way down to your frames. You have to understand what you're looking at there before what you see in a sim is actually going to make sense to you.
yep, yep. Basic OSI layer things, people, you'll learn that. I think they start teaching it in mid A plus or something like that. So
Oh, I covered, man, in my boot camp. I drill people in it.
yeah, that
It's
OSI layer, just those fundamental things. OSI layer is probably one of the first things you'll learn when it comes to networking. So just, and it takes you a long way in your career, all the way to executive level. You'll still be talking about OSI
oh, yeah. Yeah.
layer issues. So there you go. But I guess
Yep.
we can wrap it up here. You can follow Chris at his links I leaves below for his LinkedIn and his boot camp. You can give it a look, give it a shout, and if you sign up, let me know. And yeah, we're going to continue next episode later on this week with the hiring circuit. So we're going to go into a little bit of HR issues that's currently going on. So people can have some awareness that you're going to apply for some jobs and you can be utmost perfect person and it has nothing to do with you when you get 10 rejections, right? We're going
Yep.
to go into the HR side of things and what they're looking at when they're trying to hire. So make sure you tune in for that one. And until next time, hey, check in again.
Lee, thank you so much, man. It's been a pleasure. Everyone out there, keep working. You'll reach your goals. Thank you.
All righty. Okay, so we're